So we're starting to make some progress on the Bullfrog Mini. And it's a little bit dirty for me working on it. Just to give you a rundown, here's what I've done. I've made a template so that I could go and drill the holes for each one of the motors, so they all appeared to be in the same spot. Alright. One of the things I noticed about some other builds is folks have been using white silicone, and I find that it starts to look a little bit cruddy. So I used the template, drilled the holes so they all end up in the same spot. As you can see, they're all in the same place. And then for each hole, I've added a little plastic grommet. So the wires pass through there. Now that does a couple things. Number one, it keeps the wires away from the sharp edge of the plastic. Not really too worried about that, but just to be a little safe. And also it makes for a much nicer finish. As you can see, it's a little bit more professional looking. And then I've just treated it with a little bit of clear silicone. That'll keep the water out. On the front, I put the camera in. This is one tough thing to go and do, I must admit. As you can see, I've scratched up the bezel a little bit on the camera, trying to get it in and turn it. It was a little bit tough, but it's in, it's working, it's the right way up. I've double checked that, and I've also sealed it with silicone caulking. Of course, I need to go and clean some of this stuff up with some acetone later on, just to get some of the dirt and crud off of it. In the back, I've put in a transmitter. As you can see, it's 600 milliwatt. Nice little short antenna. There's a rubber grommet inside here as well, a little bit different than before, and I will eventually just put a little heat shrink on this just to, make sure that it's all sealed up. So that's where we are right now. I've also put in a simple little mount. I've got to go and clean up the bottom because it's gotten a little bit dirty in there from putting the mount in. I'm going to go and put the flight controller in there. I know people are going to say, oh hey, you drilled some holes in the bottom, that's not a good idea, aren't you worried about leaks? Well, truth be told, there's not enough water pressure to really worry about. These things are not going under the water, they're just sitting on it, and each one of these things has been sealed with silicone as well, so I'm not worried too much about water getting in there. So that's where we are, and in a little while I'll roll the camera again and show you where we are in the next phase of the build. So, I've soldered up the ESC. I'm using a 4-in-1 ESC, just make it easier for the build, that's all. I just didn't want to have a whole bunch of ESCs lying around inside, then have to figure out how to go and glue them down, or that sort of thing. The ESC that I'm using right now is shrink wrapped. You can see she's got some shrink wrap on it. I'm going to pull that off. I'll throw on some silicone conformal coating, since this is in an environment, or would be used in an environment where it's potential for water to get inside or drip. We'll just make sure that the ESC is protected. We'll do the same with the flight controller as well. The other thing is, I mounted the motors. Not sure I can find one to show you, but I've done some reading about soft mounting motors, how it cuts down on vibration. These frames are hollow and they're very stiff, and I've got another copter that's got a hollow fiberglass frame, and I can tell you the vibration and the noise coming from them is pretty severe. So I don't know whether that's the case for this thing. I've never flown it, as you can imagine, but I did soft mount the motors just to be safe. That's it. So next up, I'm going to mount the ESC. I'll put the shrink wrap over all of the solder joints, and then I'll apply the silicone conformal coating. Get her mounted inside. Not sure how I'm going to mount it just yet. Height is a real problem inside this frame. If I stack it, I'm afraid I'm going to run out of room, so I'm going to see if there's maybe another option. And then we'll get it mounted, and the next after that will be set up the flight controller, flash it, config it, do the basic config anyways, and get it mounted inside and start doing all the wiring. Anyways, that's next up. Alrighty, so I've coated it with the silicone conformal coating now. I love this stuff. It's sort of like a nail polish, but it's pretty cheap insurance. You put a coat on this on your ESCs and there isn't too much worry about water and stuff affecting them. You can solder through it, and you know, it's just some good stuff. Anyways, I've coated it. I put on the shrink wrap. We're all done. We're going to go mount it next, and then you know, while this is drying, I think I'm going to go and flash the flight controller and start getting it prepped. So that's next up. Alrighty, I have now mounted the not the flight controller, but the ESC. I've put it in here. I've mounted it a little bit forward, mostly because I just simply don't want to go and stack stuff inside. There just simply isn't enough height in here, so I want to keep everything as low to the ground as possible. Anyways, next up, mount the flight controller and start doing the wiring. We'll get back to you. Ciao. Well, next up is I made up a cable. It's a little bit on the long side, but I'll just tie it down, making sure that it was in the right order, because I put the ESC in a different format instead of sideways with the wires on both sides. It means that all the motors are connected to the ESC in the wrong order, so I've made up a little cable with the order correctly. Fingers crossed. I'll check it later on, make sure that it's right, and adjust if necessary. But the flight controller's there. I'm using an APM Mini. I'm an APM guy, not a Betaflight guy, so sorry for the Beta guys, but that's my my preferred flight controller. Anyways, next up is finish off some of the connections and then do some of the basic config on it, and that's it. So I'm just going to go. I've connected it all up. I've got power running to it now. I didn't get any white smoke, so I'm kind of happy. I have a habit of actually destroying flight controllers. Yay! Got my receiver connected, and I've got a telemetry modem on it, and I am just connecting my ground station to it right now. And then we'll do the basic radio config and a couple things like that. And then we'll mount everything back in and arrange all the wires. So the thing I want to do is I want to do a motor test, because I want to make sure that they're all spinning in the right order. Not the right direction, I've already confirmed that, but in the right order. Since I made the wiring harness myself, I want to make sure I didn't accidentally swap one of the motors over. And so I'm going to go and do that test next. And then we're good to go. Oh, and I'll do the RC calibration as well. So I've got the board running now. I didn't get any white smoke out of it. We're all good there. I've got a telemetry modem on it, but clearly there's something that's not right with the telemetry modem. It seems to take forever to connect, so maybe I've got a baud rate issue. I'll have to have a look at it. The motors are all going to test them all now. It should go this one, this one, this one, and then this one. So I'm going to go and give them a test right now. That's number one. And the next one, good. And the next one. Stop that. Thank you. And the last one. Yeah, definitely have a telemetry modem problem. Anyways, they all test in the right direction, and they're all... Clearly I've got my cable set up right, because the motors are going in the right order. So that's goodness. So next what I want to do is I've got to fasten this thing down, do a accelerometer, gyroscope calibration, all that good stuff, and then we'll move on from there. Alrighty. So what I did was I put the flight controller back in. I put on some higher standoffs just so I could get a USB in there, since I'm having trouble with my telemetry radio. I've done the calibration now, so she knows what level it is, she knows what her sides are. I've also done the radio calibration over again just to be safe since the radio was acting up. Frame type has been set, so everything is for the most part done. I need to mount it in its finished position and then finish adding on the last few wires like an LED status, and I think that's it. So next time I think what I'll do is I'll try to arm it and see if she actually works. So, oh, and it looks like I need to put a little foam on the barometer. Anyways, one piece of advice, you guys, having a nice collection of USB adapters is probably a good thing. I found a standard USB connection wouldn't go in there, so this little adapter made a 90-degree elbow and made life easier. Anyways, that's it for right at the moment, and I'll get back to you. So, here we go, boys. Making a little progress. I had to pull out my OSD. It seems to be screwed. I will do some more reading about it, but for whatever reason it lights up just for a split second and does nothing, so it may be destined for the round bin in the sky. But the machine itself, you can see the flight controllers there. I've configured it now. It's got the latest version, or the latest supported version anyways, for the APM. The accelerometers, gyroscopes, all that good stuff have all been calibrated. ESC has been calibrated. I've actually armed it now, or the motor spin up as they're supposed to, in the right direction, thank goodness. As you can see, I've got the ESC mounted. I've temporarily connected up the camera directly to the transmitter. I've set the transmitter to the right frequency so I know that it's transmitting. My transmitter, so my RC transmitter is set up for it. All of the flight values have been set. I don't think there's much left to do other than I'm going to have to make some kind of a panel that I can put down in here that just protects the flight controller and ESC from the battery, and that's something I'm going to have to work out, because there's not a lot of space when you start trying to get a battery into there. So I've got to come up with some way of protecting that flight controller. So either that, or I got to come up with a different battery. I don't know. Maybe something a little bit shorter and squatter. I haven't decided yet. But anyways, there she is so far. What's missing is the GPS. I want to put a little GPS in here with a compass, so none of that is working at the moment. That's really it at the moment. GPS is on order. It's just a little tiny one with a built-in compass, so that's coming. And I will, I think, if I can, I'm going to throw a little 12-volt regulator in there, or at least an adjustable one, dial it down to about 10 volts. The ESC and the motors will support 4S, so if I can get a 4S battery in there, she's really going to go. These props will support up to an 8-inch prop, so I'm probably going to go with a 6-inch tri-blade, which I think will be pretty sexy and pretty fast. I'm not a racer, so it doesn't really matter, but that's the plan. She needs to be bathed. She's a little bit on the dirty side yet, but pretty neat in there. It's not too bad. I will eventually go and tie the wires down, get them all tucked away, a little hot glue here and there just to make them nice and tidy. I'm not putting internal LEDs on it or beepers. I don't see the point. Since it's FPV, the OSD goes and tells you anyway. So that's it for now. Next up, OSD and the GPS. Okay, boys, well, I think I pretty much got everything put together now. She's all assembled. I've tied the wires down, and I've gone and made myself a little plate, a little strap to go and hold the battery in place. And I'm going to go stick this in next and put a couple screws in it just to hold her in a position. And then I guess the next thing to do is see if she flies. So we'll just Slip this in here. Figure out where my pins are. All nice and snug. I can probably put some screw or some nuts on it if I really needed to put some nuts on it, but I only have standoffs that are threaded on 3 of the 4 posts because the 8pm Mini has one corner where you just can't get anything screwed onto it. Anyways, probably don't actually need these nuts put on, but I will for the time being. In theory, anyways. Oh, man. And here we go. So that'll protect the board, and it protects the AC. And now for the big test. Can I actually get a battery in here? And that'll be a big fat yes. So there we go. So the only thing that's left after that be to put the panel on it, throw some props on it, and see if this baby flies. And of course I have to come back and I'll put the GPS on it and a new OSD in it at some point, but hey, there she is. All done. Pretty cool. Looking forward to seeing what it's like. I live not far from a lake, so it'd be kind of interesting to see what happens when you get it to a lake. Anyways, y'all have fun now.